Welcome along to the Ever So Lean podcast. I'm Matt Sims. Each episode, we get a fascinating insight along with some useful hints and tips as I'm joined by some fantastic guests who all have one thing in common, and that's a passion for developing continuous improvement cultures that drive engagement, improve metrics, and reduce costs.
The Ever So Lean podcast with Matt Sims. You know it makes sense.
This episode is sponsored by Catalyst Consulting Limited. Catalyst Consulting exists to help people and organisations work better today and be ready for tomorrow. They have a rich history of igniting business transformation using business agility, lean, Six Sigma, strategy deployment, agile and change management. They can help you and your organisation to develop the skills necessary to work and manage differently. To find out more, check out catalystconsulting.co.uk. Right, hold on to your seats because today we are breaking new ground on the Ever So Lean podcast. We are taking lean methodology to an entire new level and exploring how it can be applied in the legal industry. And to give us an insider's view, we have the one and only Sarah Harris joining us here in the studio. Now, with over a decade of experience as a criminal barrister, regulatory partner and CI practitioner, Sarah is now leading her firm's innovation offering whilst also being the first participant in the law field to successfully graduate as a Lean Six Sigma Business Black Belt, a BQF accredited program that focuses on the needs of organisations in the digital age. Excellent qualification. Can't wait to hear all about that. So buckle up, folks, as we dive into the exciting world of lean in legal with the incredible Sarah Harris as we find out what lean in law actually looks like, the challenges and the benefits it's bringing. Sarah, welcome to the Ever So Lean podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to be here.
What an eventful half an hour we've just had. It's been great fun.
It really has. Talk about innovation. Can't even get the headsets to work. It's always the way, isn't it?
We've had Lean Six Sigma for Dummies book out. Martin would be proud of us. We've had it out. We've worked out the root cause was the mic wasn't turned on. It's good fun. It's really good fun. And it shows the tools do work. No, it's brilliant. I'm so pleased you're here. But when you think about lean and continuous improvement, you think about production lines and car manufacturers and logistics. You don't think about things like law. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's been a real journey about how it successfully fits into sort of professional services and law in particular.
I bet. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it. So before we dive into that then, let's hear a little bit about you then, your career highlights. What have you been up to?
Well, it's been a bit of a circuitous sort of journey to where I am now. As I say in my LinkedIn profile, I'm a bit of a kind of shapeshifter in terms of what my job title is. But I think all the things that run through it is that essentially I'm just sort of an advocate. I enjoy advocating for change, being enthusiastic for change, and really kind of being persuasive around why we need to kind of challenge things, stay on top of the changing kind of customers and clients that use law. So that's kind of been the thread that runs through it. I started off, as you say, sort of criminal barrister, having had a very brief stint as a child actress, the highlight of which was playing the recorder next to Sonia in EastEnders with her trumpet. I don't know if you remember Sonia with her trumpet. I don't know if any other listeners do, but that was a highlight. I shared a stage with her. And then I realised, right, it's not for me. I'm going to go to the bar.
That's amazing.
And so it was at a criminal set in London for 5 years, so prosecuting and defending various criminal offences. And then I went on to comment to Kingsley Napley. Initially, just sort of for 6 months, it was meant to be advocating and doing hearings for large national healthcare regulators. And then that then led to sort of client management, client relationship for those large clients, which is the obvious sort of segue into then lean, because lots of the work we were doing was higher volume for fixed fees, so that the margins were all in kind of eliminating waste and thinking with a lot more discern about what it is you're actually doing and describing as a process. So you can see how that then flowed into lean. And at the time I was lucky to work with a colleague called Rowena Ricks. She was a real proponent of Lean Six Sigma. She was really into the stats side of things. So that was where we kind of started with kind of DMAIC projects in those particular areas of law, and then became a partner at KN, and I've now taken a more sort of central role in the firm, so moving away from just the regulatory side looking at the whole business because we've got 12 practice areas. So looking at the whole business and how we kind of drive innovation and create a kind of innovation culture. So it's been a bit of a journey.
Highlight of which being Sonia's musical buddy.
I know, I should have just stopped there, shouldn't I? Taken the rest of it off. Yeah, it was good fun.
From memory, she was awful at the trumpet as well.
Yeah, she was, which meant that there was less pressure on me from a recorder point of view. It was.
And you also recently completed the business black belt as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah, with Catalyst, which was brilliant because there was a recognition on Catalyst's part, which I think is, quite forward-looking, that actually in professional services, lean can be applied differently. Certainly the stats side of it, the statistical parts still have their place, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of other ways of implementing it that have more relevance and are more, I guess, user-friendly to those in professional services.
Sometimes that can be the thing that puts people off, isn't it? That technical side of it.
Absolutely.
It put me off because I looked at it and thought, well, how am I going to apply that to what I do? Is it really relevant? And I was a bit scared of it. And I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah, it was really sort of off-putting to me as well. I've never been any good at maths or any kind of statistics. But what I think is key is that actually, and I sort of talk about the challenges of doing it in law, I think moving away from the jargon and moving away from some of the kind of traditional principles is okay. And I think what's nice about Catalyst is that they're recognising that the need to kind of adapt principles for different audiences, because, you go into a room full of lawyers who are really super busy looking after clients and you start talking about standard deviation, they're like, well, this isn't really relevant to me. It's making it relevant kind of and translating it without them even knowing what it is they're doing in some respect, getting people to do domestic projects without being like, right, we are in the define phase. I think sometimes we can just move away from that sort of, having to use the jargon all the time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Some people are switched off by the term methodology as well. Some people just don't like that strict, you must follow this, you must do that. There's a condition, I don't know if you're aware of it, I think it's called PDA, and it means that basically as a human being, you struggle to follow instruction or struggle to follow direction. And I think more so nowadays, we're now looking more at things like that and other learning difficulties that people have. And sometimes you do need to adapt. And it's great to see that we are adapting Lean Six Sigma to be able to fit into that sort of environment. So I'm really intrigued to know, how does Lean actually fit into the law field?
Well, KN was one of the sort of first law firms, certainly in the UK, that were applying Lean and Lean Six Sigma in the legal field. One of a number of firms. It was way back kind of in 2007, 2008. And back then there were kind of just pockets around the firm of, look, we'll just do sort of ring-fenced projects, because there was me and Rowena who was quite interested by it. But sort of it was quite immature in that sense. Whilst senior leadership were obviously supportive in the sense that allowed us to do it, it was still quite sort of marginal. But over the 15 years, it's really, really developed. So we've now established a centralised programme from 2020 onwards. So we've got our own Master Black Belt, Cliff, who sort of has led on that centralised programme. And our model is essentially to have a small central team of CI experts who run projects cross firm, but also coach green belts and yellow belts who are empowered to go away and do their own thing. And also our trainees get training in Lean Six Sigma. And the idea is obviously to have that mature kind of model where it's really just a mindset rather than, just project after project after project. So that's what it looks like at KN. It's more around getting people to think in a certain way and to challenge and to think about what it is they're doing and what value it's adding.
You're really creating the culture, aren't you? So you're not just training individuals to go away and do the projects. You're spreading it amongst everybody within the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of when we have new joiners, they have a CI induction. That's any new joiners, be it new partners. They all have a session with myself and Cliff where we talk about CI and innovation. Say, look, you're new to KN, and the best thing about that is that you've got fresh eyes and you can see some of the things that we might be blind to, because all of us get sort of blinded to some of the processes that we do just because we do them. And so we always kind of reach out to them and say, look, please tell us what is completely bonkers to you when you've come here and said, why on earth do they do that? So actually, it really is that kind of getting that culture when people join us, as well as from the trainees as well.
So what would you describe as your mission statement then? Do you have like a mantra that you're working towards?
Yeah, so our mission statement from a CI point of view is to embed CI across KN, enabling greater client satisfaction increasing profitability and creating a culture where our people are empowered to make change happen and are celebrated for doing so. And I think we still had to have client satisfaction rather than customer satisfaction. There's quite a kind of delicacy about people. The lawyers still like their clients, even though we try and explain how they are also customers. But so we kept client in there. And yes, it's about increasing profitability, but as you say, it's more around celebrating when people come forward and say, look, I do it this way, but actually thinking about it, why have I been doing it this way? Could we do it a different way? And that's really what we think is really important. And Kane's got a great culture in terms of being non-hierarchical. It's about, being able to talk about and challenge wherever you are in the business, which is really important.
Did you find that quite challenging when you went between doing the physical training where I presume customers was used and then you go back into the workplace and you used to use clients? Is that quite hard to adapt?
I genuinely feel there's been so many translations that you have to go when you take it back to law firms. You have to kind of, check yourself in terms of talk about going to the Gemba, and it's like, you're not talking about any of that. It's just like, we're going to go and sit with departments to talk about this, and that you've got to really kind of just sometimes instill all these principles, but in a way that has words that resonate with lawyers and with people in a legal business, because sometimes those other things don't resonate. So if you think about the 8 ways, for example, I to this day still find it very difficult to work out what those 8 ways translate to in a legal sense. And you've got kind of overproduction, all these sort of things, and sometimes they're really overlapping. And even I've got a green belt who I'm working on a project with at the moment, and she comes to me and says, what does this one mean? And even I'm a bit like, I actually don't know. Don't worry too much about it. The point is, it generally means this, but it can be quite difficult to translate.
Definitely. I've found that as well. One of the 8 ways is transportation, and getting people to understand that transportation wasn't a lorry going from A to B or a van driving from A to B, trying to get them to understand it was movement around the shop floor.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really indicate that
No.
when you hear the word. And some of the icons as well, if you Google it, some of the icons they put with this stuff, and it's misleading.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that's really challenging to try and translate that. Have you done that then? Have you been working through trying to move the content?
Yeah, so Cliff's done a really helpful kind of translation of what those 8 ways in law look like, with examples, like people having to check things too many times. Are we duplicating effort? Are we gearing right? Is the gearing right? So we've kind of made it relevant to law, but you really have to do that at the outset, because otherwise, people are like, I don't know what you mean by inventory. What are you talking about? I don't, and it just, again, it's that kind of getting buy-in from making it relevant. What's in it for me? Like, how is this relevant to what I do?
Yeah.
It's really, really important to get otherwise people just switch off and just won't really engage.
Yeah, exactly. And if you lose them early on, it's very difficult to get them back then, isn't it? You kind of get one go at doing it. So what were the drivers then? What's led you down this path?
I mean, initially, speaking completely frankly, initially the driver was completely financial, because we were saying, look, to go to these tenders, to win these tenders, to provide a low fixed fee and a low hourly rate, we need to kind of do this as efficiently as possible. And, we're a London law firm. And one of the things that, there's been so much movement in the legal market around regional offices, AI, automation. And so it really was a kind of, look, how do we ensure that we are providing value for money, not necessarily low cost, but value for money? So that was the real driver at the start. And actually, what has then happened is that because technology and sort of legal tech in particular has accelerated at such a rate, it's also clear that like lean and sort of lean methodologies are crucial in working out how to implement those technologies in the business. Because, if you put tech into a rubbish process, it's a disaster. And I say that from experience, as I'm sure many do. And so actually, the insertion of technology into the practice of law has to have a methodology behind it. I mean, that's not to say you take all the fun out of it. It needs to obviously also remain sort of playful and enthusiastic and all those things, but also it does involve, well, hold on, let's just map out this process, because actually, is it the right solution for right now? So that's why the drivers have completely changed, I think. I mean, the legal market obviously it's got massive challenges, or sort of, I should say, the traditional legal market is being challenged in so many ways. The big four, sort of new startups. There's a massive change in client need. So the other driver, I think, for us is just really being able to hear the voice of the customer voice of the client. Oops. And I think that's one of the key principles, that it means that we always need to keep an eye on who are we doing this for? Are we doing it because it sounds good in a kind of latest press release? Are we doing it because we want to make our lives easier? Or are we doing it because actually this is the best thing for the client? And I think lean really does always bring you back to that central reason for doing things, which I think is really important.
I think I told you this when we were doing the prep for the show, but I did some jury service back at the beginning of this year. And it's my first experience of going into a court, and it really changed my perspective on how, the legal service works, what some of the processes were. And I was fortunate to be chosen for the jury on the first day, so there wasn't much waiting around on that day. But what I found through the rest of the process was it was so inefficient in terms of they would call witnesses, but the witnesses had gone out for lunch or they wasn't around. There was no planning. There's so much waiting around. Then it would be the jury comes back in. So we would sit down. Then they would go, oh, we have a question, but we disagree with that. Can the jury leave the room whilst we discuss it? So we'd go back out again. Then we'd come back in again. And I couldn't believe the amount of inefficiency in the process. And of course, my lean mind was just ticking away. I just wanted to stand up and go, can I just give you some suggestions?
Would have gone down really well, Matt. Would have gone down really well. It's funny because the practice of, certainly in if you use that example, kind of criminal law and criminal advocacy and that kind of process is very much traditionally seen as almost, certainly from the barrister's point of view, it's an art form. It's not a process. It's something that you're skilled at, and you go to bar school, and it's all very kind of intangible about in terms of how you do it and how you do it well. I mean, if you say that, what the old the Deming quote of, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, the idea of saying that to lots of sort of lawyers or barristers, they would be hugely offended by that, because, or certainly historically, because it's like, well, no, it's not a process. It's something, it's bigger than the sum of its parts. It's an art form. And absolutely it is. And don't get me wrong, I've seen barristers and advocates who are just born to do it. Right. However, that's not to say that there's not some benefit in outlining some process and challenging some of the things that we do and why we do them. So there definitely is a kind of balance to be struck there.
Yeah, I found it really amazing at the end of it when they asked us to submit our expenses. And I was expecting to go on to like an online portal and just upload a few receipts, but it was a manual, fill out the form, staple the receipts to it and send it in the post. It blew my mind that's what I was doing. It's like, what? Crazy. So you mentioned that you've had to change some of the jargon.
Yeah.
So you gave the example of some of the 8 wastes, but how about some of the tools? Have you had to change any of the physical names of the tools?
No, I mean, certainly things like, the 5 whys and the fishbone diagram, generally speaking, now the tools that you've got, the collaborative tools that we use, like Mural or whatever it is, they've got those templates. You don't have to call it whatever. You just go through the process. However, I think some of the terminology is useful. Like I always play, before I do the 5 whys exercise, I always play that video. Is it at the Jefferson Memorial? I can't remember which it is, the building where it's like, why are there pigeons, why are there spiders, etc. I've probably summarised that completely wrong, but you know what I mean. That short video of why you're doing that exercise. I always try and kind of contextualise it if I do use a kind of lean tool, and sort of explain why it's relevant to what we're doing. I tend to not. A lot of the data crunching happens behind the scenes, in terms of we get a lot of data in terms of what people do, because obviously lawyers like to record every 6 minutes they do. So you've actually got a lot of data, and a lot of that stuff, the kind of stats that you do around that, the Six Sigma stuff, kind of happens a little bit behind the scenes, and then you play that back to people in a kind of maybe more user-friendly way. But generally speaking, that the tools that we've certainly found the most useful is the 5 whys. I think you can't beat it.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, and it's so obvious when you do it.
But again, though, going back to your previous point, it's not very descriptive. 5 whys straight away implies we ask why 5 times. You have to kind of explain to people it's called 5 why, but don't stop at 5.
Yeah, exactly. We chuck you out after 5. No, it's really good. And it's so funny how at the end of it, you come out with things and people are kind of surprised at what they've come out with. One of the things we do in the induction for CI is, what Cliff does is get people to bring a watch with them, and get people to kind of draw their watch without looking at it. And then obviously recognizing how, although you look at something every day, you don't really see it sometimes because you just look at it every day. And I think sometimes people are so surprised at what they've been doing. And you say, well, why have you been doing that? Like, well, I've just been doing it because of this. And then you keep going, and they come out sort of quite surprised and sort of enlightened. So it's really good fun.
It's that penny drop moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a video that I like to show, and it's about the monkeys getting squirted in the cage. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. I mean, it sounds a bit bizarre.
I'm going to make a right hash of trying to explain this, right? But basically there was this experiment done where there was like 12 monkeys in a cage. In the middle of the cage was a ladder. At the top of the ladder were some bananas that were hanging from the top. And when the monkeys tried to climb the ladder to get to the bananas, they were squirted with a hose. So what happened was the 12 monkeys in there learned that if we go near those bananas, we're going to get squirted. So we're not going to go near them. We don't go near them. And they stopped. But then what they did over a period of like 6 months, they kept taking the monkey out and replacing it with a new monkey.
Oh.
And that new monkey would go in there and he would go to climb that ladder. And they go, no, don't climb the ladder. You're going to get squirted. So he wouldn't climb up there.
Yeah.
Anyway, over this period, they eventually replaced all the 12 monkeys. So by the end of it, all of those monkeys had never experienced being squirted.
Yet still they didn't try and go and get the banana.
They didn't try and climb the ladder. So, but they wouldn't do it just through, we've always done it this way. We can't go down that road. And it's a really good way of explaining how socially we become conditioned to the environment we're in.
Absolutely.
Rather than going, well, actually, let's question that. We can change the way we do it. I don't think I did too bad.
No, it makes complete sense. I think that's why, that in that in the vision statement around just embedding a culture where it's okay to challenge people, whether that be someone more senior than you or less senior than you, it doesn't matter. It's the way you do it, it's the framework in which you do it around a kind of healthy curiosity where you're kind of celebrated for asking those questions rather than being like, well, how dare you ask that? I'm, more senior than you and this is how we do it. That's just so far from what we are as an organisation. So I think that's why it's been so much easier to embed such a kind of broad CI programme, I think.
Learn and be curious is the way I'd phrase it.
Yeah.
You've got to ask the questions. I saw a thing on LinkedIn the other day. These little things pop up every now and then. And it says something along the lines of, we don't employ clever people to tell them what to do. We employ clever people for them to tell us what to do because they're coming in and asking the right questions.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's funny because I posted out on LinkedIn the other day, warming people up to the fact this episode was coming. And my phone kept flashing. I was like, what's going on? I looked at it and there's like 30 people from law firm have all liked it. And I was like, wow, this is great. The engagement in it is amazing.
Oh, yeah. And I think that comes, I've listened to other sort of episodes of the podcast. I think there's an agreement that, it's really got to come from the top. If they got to really understand why it is that it needs the input it does. And it's not just sort of letting it happen, letting these people get on with their CI stuff. It's actually around them understanding the value of it. And actually, if you don't have that senior leadership buy-in, then I think you're really kind of pushing at a much harder door to open. So yeah, I think that senior leadership buy-in is just so important.
Was it the senior leadership that wanted to bring this in and searched for people to do it? Or was it people within the company that goes, we should do this?
Yeah, it came from, so initially it was Robina, as I say, she was a real kind of driver for it. And I kind of jumped on that bandwagon. We both sort of had a lot of fun with it. And, we went to senior management, went to our leaders and said, look, this is what we want to do. And initially it was very much that sounds like a sensible thing to do. I can understand why you want to do that. So it very much started that way. But then as I saw the benefits of it, it started to kind of become bigger. But there were sort of flashpoints along the way. In any organisation, you have people sometimes saying, well, isn't this just common sense? Like, there's this kind of, isn't this just common sense? It's like, well, if it's just common sense, why hasn't this been done? That's not kind of how it works. And kind of sometimes there is effort needed to explain to senior leadership why it's relevant, what's in it for them, and again translating it into the legal business. So I don't think you can expect senior leadership to just see immediately this is really, really important, let's throw money at it. I think it's quite a gradual process, and then showing them the benefits of that, both in terms of pounds and pence, but also in terms of the talent you're attracting and the kind of cognitive diversity you get from having certainly non-lawyers and lean practitioners to question you as well.
How did you frame that then? How did you get them to understand that it was the right thing to do?
I mean, it was easy back when we first started, as I say, it was all around kind of improving profit margins on a kind of fixed fee model. And so it was quite easy to say, well, look, this is the waste. This is how much it's costing. This is what we can do. This is how much we can give you back so we can pay for ourselves and some. So it's very much very kind of financial return on investment at the start. And then I think it was more around, as the legal market more broadly was changing, it was showing them that kind of, I don't like burning platform because I don't think it's particularly positive. I think it's more that sort of, look what's going on in the market. How are we going to navigate that? Well, we could just do it in a kind of haphazard sort of way of trying to just do what we think is right. Or we could use this same methodology, not so much Six Sigma, but the lean methodology to make sure that client-centered approach drives what we're doing. And don't get me wrong, we've still got a long way to go. I think law, generally speaking, isn't always great at listening to, or law firms traditionally haven't been great at listening to their clients in a broad sense. And actually, there was a really interesting pilot that the SRA ran around kind of review platforms, a bit like Trustpilot, about how do clients actually give their feedback on law firms. And I still think there's a long way to go. But I think making sure that the firm saw the benefit of the broader approach, I think, became more important than just the pennies and pounds at the outset.
That's interesting. So getting them to think about the long game rather than the short game was that's the challenge, because when you go to a senior leader, all they're worried about initially is, what's our financial target in year? What's this going to deliver me?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to get people to put that initial investment in for the long term. And I'm looking for the magic, the medicine that I can hand out to people and go, take this and you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Still haven't found it.
Yeah.
Not found it yet.
No, I think that when because there's been so much sort of change in the kind of volatile way of the world at the moment, and the kind of rise of volatility and what's going on, I think that kind of Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3 planning in terms of 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, that's where lean really helps you, doesn't it? Because it's just like, well, where do we need to be to make sure that we're in the right place for these clients? It's not, in the meantime, yes, you can do some domain projects on particular aspects of billing or client inquiries or whatever it is. But I think it's actually broader than that. And it's more the kind of leadership management point of view that also brings the benefit.
Yeah, and I guess it's not like you go to clients as they're looking for someone, and you go, but by the way, we do lean, and they go, oh, right, we're in, we're coming to you then.
Yeah.
It's all that goes on where the customer doesn't see, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Are you ready to elevate your team's ways of working? Are you seeking fresh insights and growth opportunities? Our experts will assess your team's practices, providing valuable insights for improvement and celebration. Reward and recognise your team with this certification tailored specifically for creating an improvement culture. The BQF Academy accreditation acknowledges your journey, outstanding outcomes, and future plans. Whether you utilise Lean, Six Sigma, project management, or continuous improvement techniques, this certification celebrates your incredible work and positive impact. Propel your team's performance to new heights with the BQF Team Excellence Culture Certification. Visit www.bqf.org.uk today and let's celebrate your success together.
13-time Shingo Prize winner Dr. Jeffrey Leiker and Toyota Kata author Mike Rother have created the Improvement Kata and Coaching Kata online course. This inexpensive, compact program is designed to transform your thinking and approach, making you a highly skilled learner and coach. Engage in deliberate practice to turbocharge your progress. You also get lifetime access to the materials, including all of the bonus interviews. Why pay up to 10 times the price elsewhere, listening to some consultant, when you can gain direct insights from the masters themselves? Skip the rest and go with the best. Join us today and embark on your journey to excellence. Just click on the link below to start your journey.
Have other firms that, presumably you all know people in other firms, do they listen to what you do and go, we're going to do that?
So historically, there's not been a huge amount. So Rowena is now another law firm, and another colleague who was doing it is now another law firm. So we have kind of spread out into the sector, and some are former lawyers and some are not. The great benefit of our team is, Cliff's history expertise is in completely different areas of different industries, which I think is just so important, because law can be so internal looking. And so that there are lots of people doing different things. I think we don't get together as much as we should. I think there's still been a kind of, well, we're doing this thing and actually it's a bit of a competitor advantage. So let's not talk too much detail about what we do, which I think, as with anything, is always flawed. So we're getting better at kind of sharing mainly, mistakes. And, I tried to do this, I tried to do that. It was a complete disaster, or this worked really well. I think we need to get a lot better at doing that as a kind of lean in legal thing, really.
It's quite common that, actually. On the episode I did with James Franz, who leads the Toyota Way Academy, he was telling me how Toyota, when they first kicked off TPS, the Toyota production system, they opened the doors and let everybody in,
Yeah.
which is totally different to what you see everywhere else. The reason they did that, they were happy for people to come in and see the solutions they deployed, because they knew that they couldn't go away and copy it because they didn't know what the problems they were trying to solve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because if you just take the solution and deploy it, you don't know if it's fixing the same problems. You might not have the same impact.
Absolutely, that makes complete sense. So if we were to say, look, we've created this solution to a problem, the merits of just copying that solution at that law firm, in fact, it would probably be a disaster, because again, you're not fixing the same problem. You've not got the same sort of drivers. So yeah, that does make complete sense. And that's another reason why, we need to be a lot more collaborative. Now that it's getting sort of bigger in terms of as a movement, I think there's definitely more room to collaborate.
I used to go on like LinkedIn jobs 10 years ago. There'd be nothing out there for continuous improvement. It'd be such a small market. They are everywhere now, like business intelligence, continuous improvement, operational excellence. It's the big thing, isn't it? Everyone wants to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's important though is, and this goes with anything, is just like not doing it because everyone else is doing it. It's doing it for the right reasons. And actually, if you've got this actual kind of culture of continuous improvement, it means that you really are doing the right things at the right thing for your firm. So you see another firm that's got a humongous legal ops function or whatever, incubator hubs or whatever it may be, and that works for them. That may, that's great. But the whole thing around it is, well, what do we need? It's not about copying. It's about kind of having a healthy interest in what people are doing to spark curiosity, but making sure that it comes back down to your basics and your client, who are going to be different with every different law firm.
And your people as well in the firm.
Yeah, absolutely.
It goes back to that generational piece. Everyone learns differently. Everyone's got different mindsets, and understanding that. So tell us about some of the challenges that you face there. I know we've touched on some of them. This is the bit that I like, because this is where people can listen and go, yeah, we have challenges like that as well. How did we overcome those? How did they overcome those?
Yes, I think speaking completely frankly, one of the challenges is, lawyers can have a, let's call it, healthy skepticism about some things. And so you've really got to be persuasive about how it's going to actually make a difference for them and in their particular practice area. They're also quite time poor. And I think the billing model the billable hour model, which we know has persisted for a long time and obviously continues to persist at the moment, doesn't help, because they have to put a certain chargeable amount of hours a day. And so when you're trying to get time, it can be difficult. And I think, in fact, that billable hour model has been a challenge in the past. Why should we improve efficiency when we charge an hourly rate and our clients are paying it? So, I think historically there's been a tide change, although no one's obviously been brave enough to kind of move away entirely from that model. But I think that clients are more discerning about, well, actually, all I care about is the value I'm getting, not how many hours you've spent on it, especially in the advent of ChatGPT and AI. They're going to expect that. So I think that has historically been a challenge. I think that will change. Regulation, law is an industry that's heavily regulated. And so when you have quite sort of true innovation sessions in terms of playful sessions where you're really thinking about what's possible with that whole kind of think like there is no box sort of thing, there is always a box because there is regulation. So it's really kind of difficult to sometimes say, look, be creative. That's fantastic. And then we'll lay the regulation on top of that. But I think lawyers find that really hard to take off the regulation, think about something and then put it back on, because they're thinking, well, yeah, but what about this? What are the risks? What happens if this happens? And I think they're quite, I'm generalizing a lot here, but, they can be a risk averse profession, especially because, often they're paid to look at what could go wrong to make sure they're looking out for your interests. So I think that can be quite challenging.
It's the natural mindset, isn't it, in that field?
It is. And it's kind of going through things with a fine tooth comb and looking at problems. I think the other thing that's been a challenge, and I think all law firms, certainly traditional law firms, have this, which I think startups don't, is they have these kind of silos of practice area. So, you've got your family law, your employment law, your different kind of practice areas, and that can sometimes drive variability in some processes which isn't always needed. There's obviously variability in the outputs in terms of what's needed, but in some of those underlying processes, billing, all the things that happen in all of those, it just drives variation. And actually, that's a really big area that we need to work on in terms of making sure, because the client doesn't care.
Yeah.
The client doesn't care what practice area and what kind of desk these people are sitting in. They just care that the processes are a light touch and they're getting value for money. So I think that's a historic challenge.
Yeah, that regulatory stuff, I can imagine, is really binding, actually, can be a real challenge to overcome. I think it's hard enough just on a manufacturing line where you're creating multiple of the same products throughout a day and you're trying to get different shifts just to remove the variation and do it in the same way.
Yeah.
If you've got this underlying piece there, it must be really challenging.
I mean, we're really lucky because we've got legal services regulatory advisory team who this is literally what they do. They advise law firms on how to navigate regulation, and they've got a fantastic mindset. They're really massively behind the innovation and CI program. And so we can just go to them and say, look, we want to do this. We've come up with this idea. How can we navigate in a completely, legitimate, forward-thinking way? How do we apply regulation, the principles of regulation to that while still pushing the boundary? So we're quite lucky to have that internal resource.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how was things like ChatGPT and AI impacted? Because this is the big thing at the moment, isn't it? This is huge.
It is huge. And I think, speaking completely honestly, Matt, there is a part of me that loves it because it's a bit like, I have been saying this for so many years. And there's a kind of like, I did say that, down the line, we've got to think about this and the other. And I think ChatGPT has really not only showed what is down the track, but also the speed at which it's coming for you. And I think that's really helped in that respect. And I think that what it has also done is started to get lawyers to think about their end-to-end of what they provide a client and what parts of that they are valuable in, right? So there are bits that can be automated. There are bits that clients won't want to be automated. And actually, it's starting to get lawyers to think about, well, where's the value that I'm actually providing, like the human value, which I think is always a healthy thing to start questioning what you do as a process. And so actually, it's made that more imperative, I think. So I'm fully here for it.
I think it's amazing. Do you know what? I used to spend hours writing the show notes that go underneath the episodes when we release the podcast.
Yeah.
I now just paste into ChatGPT the key bits and it writes it for me. Don't tell anyone, it's a secret. It's really good. It's brilliant. It's so good. And the kids' bedtime stories as well. I say, write me a bedtime story about my daughter and her trip to the moon.
Do you? I've never. Is that a thing? I might try that.
Does it in seconds. Just say, write me a bedtime story where Millie goes to the moon and she eats lots of cheese and then she comes back and she turns into a mouse. And within like half a second, it will write you this bedtime story.
I'm actually going to do that. You
tell it how many words you want, though, as you get a novel.
Yeah, but I'm definitely going to say as part of the prompts, part of the instructions, NB must be under 3 minutes.
yeah, no more than 50 words. Yeah. But I go down, I haven't told the kids how I'm doing it, and I go, I wrote your story this morning.
They just think you're really creative.
Yeah, they think I'm amazing. It's so good though, but you can do so much on it, even with Lean though. And Lean Six Sigma, the statistical stuff. If you paste the data into ChatGPT, you can ask it to do the analysis for you. You can ask it what you do to fix the problem that it identifies. It's amazing.
Well, at the session that I saw you speak, they did a kind of demo of it, and it was just insane how it kind of found the upper control limits, lower control limits, and everyone in the room was just kind of aghast at what it can do. And obviously it has its limits at the moment and kind of risks and all those sorts of things you have to pick the bones out of. But the point is when you're kind of impressed by technology, something that really blows your socks off, that's just the thin end of the wedge of what's coming.
It's amazing. And I don't look at it as, oh my God, that's going to take my job away. We don't need lead experts anymore. I look at it as making my job easier.
Absolutely. And I think also the change management tools that you're taught as part of Lean and as part of especially the business black belt at Catalyst, now more than ever, change management is key because we've all got change fatigue, all of us. Like we're all sick of it. We had COVID, we had this, we've had all of this kind of terrible things happening, and there is change fatigue, but it's not going to stop. So we've got to navigate it in a way that makes people still feel kind of hopeful for the future and their part in it.
Isn't it funny as human beings that we are so change adverse? Even people like, I speak for myself here that, I champion change. Yeah, I love my routine. If my routine gets deviated from, I can't cope.
It's just human instinct.
It's really funny. I've got my daughter, she's 9 months now. But we have a routine where we know that it works between me and my wife, where we sort of tag up and we both get a certain amount of sleep based on this routine.
Yeah.
If my wife says, "Oh, she's going out for with her company for a meal that evening," it changed my routine. I'm like,
absolutely
panicking. I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
How am I going to get over this?
Yeah,
this is
true.
change.
It's true. What's that thing? Yeah, the only constant is change or whatever it is. It's coming for us, and it's just trying to stay playful and optimistic with it. And I think that's the value that, people like yourself and other consultants, and, at Catalyst, etc., they play. It's that kind of, that this is happening. Don't fear it. Embrace it. Have fun along the way, and sort of see it as an opportunity rather than looking at what you're losing.
I think two key things with change is make it fun and keep people informed.
Yeah.
People don't like surprises. They need to understand why and when and how. Was it what, how, when, who, and why? Like key elements, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So let's move more into the cultural side then. So about how you've built the culture. I'd love to hear some like use cases of what you've done in this field.
So in terms of use cases, there's been loads. They're usually the kind of usual suspects, really repeatable, the really more repeatable stuff. So your billing, your new client inquiries, that sort of stuff. We've also done a big project with our quarter protection team. So they're a team of lawyers who act as deputies for people who are elderly people who have got brain injury or people who need their finances looking after. So a lot of what they do involves management of people's finances and sort of looking after their interests. And they've got, a huge amount of clients that they work for. And so I did a project with them looking at how we could improve those processes. So that's been a big project recently. But for me, the use cases have slightly changed because, as we're saying, we've still got the DMAIC stuff, and that's great. But it's the kind of agile startup type stuff that I learned at Catalyst training around kind of empathy mapping, looking at what our clients want, looking at what products we can use. At the moment, that's the kind of use cases that excite me and sort of I'm focusing on, because I think actually we've got some really exciting new products sort of coming out in the next sort of few months, which I'm really excited about. But it's also getting the firm behind that kind of agile, let's just get it out there.
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect. Just get it out there, and then we're going to listen to what the clients think of it. And then if they tell us it's rubbish, we're going to ask them what would make it better. And that, that for us at the moment is where that's the use cases that we're really working on, is using that kind of agile DMADVA kind of springboard for innovation.
And again, it goes back to that human mindset. We naturally want to not deploy anything until it's 100% there, it's polished, it's 100%. Nice, it's brilliant.
Yeah. But it's not what people want.
Yeah, exactly.
We
spent so much time on it. It's changing that mindset, and that deploying sort of 75% of a product now and then learning from the feedback I think that's the much better way of doing it. So have you created metrics and measures for success? How do you measure the success of what you're doing?
So it's really difficult actually in a law firm, because often law firm metrics are sometimes quite blunt tools. So they talk in terms of revenue per partner or contribution, which is quite a difficult figure to unpack in terms of it includes the overheads of the firm, it includes lots of different things. So actually, when you're doing a project, one of the first projects I did, we used contribution as a metric, but actually it's really, really pointless in some respects, because it's even if you made massive change, which in some respects really moved the needle, you'd see like a 1% change in contribution. So from a control point of view, it's really difficult, because you're like, well, I'm not going to see the changes. It's too blunt a metric. So some of the historic metrics that law firms use, I think, are unhelpful. So it's really about drilling down into more granular metrics when you're doing sort of DMAIC projects. I think on the other side, from an innovation point of view, as far as I'm concerned, the metrics for me are, number of suggestions that come into we've got an innovation framework called Kairos. It's how many ideas are we getting in, how many sort of ideas are we progressing, how many people reach out to me and ask me a question. It's things like that in my head that as a metric, I want to make sure keep going up rather than going down.
Yeah, you're so right. Focus on the engagement metrics, because if you get the engagement metrics and you get the input that you want, you're going to get that output naturally.
The rest should follow, hopefully. Yeah.
It's so true. And that's the hardest thing I find, because lots of metrics in all industries are floating around already, but there's not many on the engagement side.
No.
And you have to kind of create them.
Absolutely. I think sort of a lot of these new products that we're launching, it's kind of work out of our version of a net promoter score, so we can actually see the sort of what people are thinking of products. I think those are a lot more helpful metrics in terms of what the client's thinking than kind of some of the pounds and pence kind of weird, kind of sometimes quite archaic financial measures that you have in the legal profession.
Net promoter score is a really interesting one for me. So if we just look at Europe, for example, the NPS scores are so influenced by the culture of that area. And basically what NPS is, it just basically works out whether people would take the training again, whether they thought it was any good. And if you ask people in Spain, they'll be really honest and they'll give you the NPS score and you'll get like 90% or something. You ask people in France, they just don't bother answering it. You ask people in the UK and they all sit on the fence. Everyone goes, oh, maybe.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, but
would you recommend it? Oh, don't know, maybe.
Yeah, which is no good for MPS because maybe gets discounted, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly. But it's pointless.
It's so, and I find MPS is such a weird measure. I like the premise of it, but I just find it really difficult to actually get any meaningful data.
Yeah, and that's why and that's why we kind of have amended it a little bit, especially because in this particular product that we're launching, which will sort of all come out in the next sort of few months, it's for a really niche customer, niche client. So it's more to gather the feelings of that product as we go along, rather than as in comparison with other things. It's more just are you liking our product more than you did when we first started it, because we've added in these extra apps, all these extra things. So that's kind of how we're trying to adapt it. But again, it's all, it's completely all new, and even that in itself is going to be kind of quite agile of saying, is there a better way of us finding out whether you're liking the product? So it's all up for grabs.
So when you say you got the ideas submission that you have come through, do you encourage people to use some of the basic 5 whys to get to the root cause of a problem when they submit the idea?
So when the idea is more kind of problem-based, this is a problem, I don't know the solution, but this has got to change because it's not the most useful way of doing it. That's definitely more one for kind of the traditional CI sort of, let's go and do some root cause analysis. Let's just, have a few initial discussions about it. When it's more, wouldn't it be great if, the more sort of true innovation stuff, which, let's be honest, even in the law firm, it's not hugely radical. It's not kind of, it's still sort of embedded in some sort of legal process. But generally speaking, we look more to the kind of empathy mapping stuff, the agile stuff. We kind of apply that more than the 5 whys, because I just think that it's more free flow. It's more kind of fun. It's more sort of let's just sit and talk about how, we can create something really new and cool. Whereas I think if it's more just that this is a problem, this is something we do at the moment, I'm not sure it's right, that's when we'll do the kind of 5 whys of, well, why are we doing it, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think different strokes for different sort of things, really. Yeah,
and I suppose at that stage, do you bring the person that submitted the idea in and give them coaching and guidance on what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Although you've got some people that put in an idea and say, look, I've had this idea, I've got this problem, and I'm too busy to deal with it, and that's okay. People say, well, actually, you shouldn't really go forward with an idea if no one's engaged in it. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if someone has said, look, this is what I've got a thought about this, that, and the other, if you can get other people that can help you kind of maybe navigate that, I think that's also okay. Otherwise, these people do have a day job as well. And so, I do get the idea that, it's not someone's job to do innovation, it's everybody's job to do it. However, I don't have 15 clients to speak to a day. So there is an element of actually helping people in that respect and sort of running with some of their ideas for them. But generally speaking, people do want to also own their idea and then present it themselves in front of management board or management team, because, it's their baby and we help them kind of, empower them to do that.
So the people that are really interested and really get into it, do you offer some form of career path for them to move forward in this space?
We offer lots and lots of sort of training qualifications in terms of green belts, yellow belts, etc. But I think there's more than that. I think we have time recording codes in terms of CI and shortly innovation in terms of, where you record your time, which, in your appraisal or if you're going for promotion or whatever, that's talked about, because obviously there's a recognition that just sitting on a chair and billing, which, has obviously huge value. It also has huge value to stop and engage with the kind of innovation function in the firm. So I think that's something that we need to do a bit more of in terms of sort of pushing metric for what we've used in innovation.
Look, I've been absolutely inspired. And, if I was 20 years younger, I think I'd go and train to work in law now and come and work at your firm. It would be really good. It's great.
Good fun. It's good fun.
I'm going to put you to the real test now.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, this is probably going to be the highlight of your career.
Depends how it goes.
This is probably harder than the business black belt. This will be hard.
Okay.
So we play a little game on the Ever Celine podcast called the Yes No Game. And it's ironic because you actually can't say yes or no, but it's called the Yes No Game.
Okay.
So I will fire you some real weird and wonderful questions over 60 seconds, and you can just answer them however you like, but don't say yes or no. That's the only rule.
Right.
You ready? Should we try it?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, I nearly just got it wrong immediately. Are you ready? Yes.
Yes. I'd already started. You're out.
That was just a practice. No, that was a practice. Right. Okay.
60 seconds on the clock. Do not say the word yes or no. Simple as that. What is your favourite food?
My favourite food is sushi.
Sushi. Do you like the one that's got the sesame seeds around the side?
Yeah. Oh my God.
That's not bad.
I mean, it's not ideal, Matt, is it? That was the second question of 60 seconds. Was I about 5 questions in, seconds in?
That, yeah. I mean, it's a good job we're not charging by the hour, is what I would say, because you wouldn't be making much profit.
Well, there you go. No, actually, I was very efficient. Very efficient.
Do you know what, though? I tried sushi for the first time the other day. Like, you know, the one with the trays you get in like the supermarket that are already all prepped up?
Yeah.
And I've always been a little bit apprehensive, but I really liked it. And it was really nice.
Do you know what's really bizarre is I like sushi, but it's definitely not my favourite food. I just panicked. I don't know why. I don't know why. I
Just said it.
It just makes it even worse. Do you like the ones with
so you
sesame on
lied.
it?
You lied, and then you got it wrong.
There you go, kids. As a lesson for you all there.
A tangled web we weave when we continue to deceive. Never mind, there's been worse.
Oh dear.
Right, so what's happening for you then? What's next up in your career now?
So, as I said, we've got some really exciting launches of some products that we're going out to market with, which is really exciting. So watch this space. I can't say too much at the moment, but watch this space.
Ooh.
We're also working more and more with external clients who approach us and say, actually, we really like some advice on our sort of processes, policies, procedures that have a legal aspect to it, but sometimes regulatory, but not always. So we're actually getting kind of more interest for that kind of not just legal advice, but sort of quasi-legal process advice. And so we're looking more and more about what that offering is going to look like. So that's very exciting. One of the things we're really keen to do, and it may be that sort of as a result of this we get some more sort of leads, but we're really keen to collaborate with people outside the legal profession or outside that industry to share experience of lean. Actually, it was really interesting listening to the space guys at the Catalyst event. You know, we wanted to collaborate more in that respect with universities, startups, people sort of outside traditional areas of law to kind of get our heads together and talk about lean and innovation. So that's something we're really, really keen to do. So that's kind of what's coming up next for us.
So if people listening now want to get in contact with you and sort of collaborate and sort of share some stories, what's the best way they can do that?
Absolutely. Either sort of reach out on LinkedIn or contact me at harris@kingsleynapley.co.uk. I'm always willing to talk about sort of new ideas, new thoughts. Yeah, just get in touch.
It's great. And that's one of the things I love about working in this industry is that you can just talk to people, like-minded people, and they could be doing, they could be packing boxes on a production line and you could be working in the legal profession, but you speak the same language. Yeah. It's so good. I love that. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So hopefully we can do a bit more of that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure and I've learned so much.
Thanks, Matt.
So, some key takeaways from today's discussion with Sarah. It was amazing to hear how we can apply this methodology in something so different. Now, I know we've spoken about this before, how it can apply to anything, but actually hearing firsthand how that's happening in the industry of law was absolutely brilliant. I loved hearing about it. It was so good. Something that jumped out for me was how Sarah and her team have sold this to their senior leaders, thinking about the long-term gains rather than the short-term gains. It was born from within. This isn't something that their senior leadership team said, we want to go down the lean methodology route. It was actually built out by the team themselves, then presented back to the leadership, get their buy-in, frame it in the right way, build up their trust, and then deliver the results. Exactly like we've heard from our other guests in the past. Absolutely brilliant. What I really liked as well is the way that the traditional lean or Lean Six Sigma as we know it doesn't fit every single use case. And what I loved is how Sarah's firm have taken it and they've translated it into their own language to fit what they do. So for example, she spoke about how they don't have customers, they have clients. So you don't have voice of the customer, you have voice of the client. She slipped up, but she's doing it and they're doing it in the organisation. So it's great that they do that. So don't feel in your organisation like you have to stick rigidly to the DMAIC cycle or use a tool at a certain step because it says you have to do that. You don't have to do that. You find the way that works for you, convert it into a language that works in your organisation. Because if you don't, it's not going to stick. People will not stick with something that doesn't fit because they'll see through it. And the last one that really stood out for me was make change fun and see it as an opportunity. Get those ideas coming in. Every problem is a treasure. And it's so true, isn't it? If you look at every problem as a treasure, as an opportunity to do well, opportunity to change things and make things better, that's just such a great way of thinking. I really like that. Make it fun, make it enjoyable, and people will stick with it. That brings us to an end of this episode of the Ever So Lean podcast. Thanks to Sarah for joining us today and sharing the ins and outs of lean in the legal profession. It's so complex and there's so much that needs to be unpicked and still so far to go as well with the likes of AI and ChatGPT. There's so much in there. And I think it's going from strength to strength, and hearing Sarah's passion and what she's doing there and how she's keen to speak to others in other industries about what they're doing really does fill me with such joy and just belief that things are moving forward with lean in so many different areas. If you like the sound of today's show and would like to hear more, please subscribe and follow the Ever So Lean podcast at eversolean.com. We'll also find episodes that you might have missed. Also, if you're on the socials, search for the Ever So Lean podcast, give us a follow and let me know your lean efforts because I really would love to hear all about them. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode. And don't forget, Ever So Lean, you know it makes sense. The Ever So Lean podcast is researched, produced and recorded by Matt Sims. Visit eversolean.com to find out more.